Shambhalala, where the lion sleeps, is a private luxury safari camp that's situated deep in 30,000 acres of unspoiled wilderness of Thornybush Reserve, which adjoins the famous Kruger National Park. It's easy to get to Shumbalala from Johannesburg. It's about a 6-hour drive through the magnificent scenery of Mpumalanga. Or you can fly direct from Johannesburg International to Eastgate Airport, a short drive by safari car from Shumbalala. Your welcome at Shumbalala will be typically African. You'll get a lovely icy perfume towel to wipe away the dust of the roads, plus a delicious cocktail to clear your palate. Shumbalala was recently refurbished from top to bottom, but still retains some of the sense of belonging that only comes with time. The thatch is weathered to a lovely silvery grey. I walked through the main lodge on my way to the chalet and was impressed by the interiors as well as the unfussy design of the lodge. It is mercifully free from those kind of arrogant statement structures that are a tribute to architects' egos, but look terribly silly in the bush. The best kind of architecture in the bush is architecture that you simply don't notice. Anything that attempts to draw attention to itself is a vanity, because any man-made structure has to compete with the bush itself, which is primal and has endured for millions of years, unlike most architects' ideas, which date immediately. The bush needs no embellishment. Shumbalala looks as though it's been there for as long as the mighty black monkeythorn trees that give shade in the heat of the day. Obviously, there's a deep, cool pool, which is never chilly, even though it's shaded by giant knob thorns. The interior is best described as African modern. There's a definite thematic link with the past in the exoticism of the carvings and the local adaptation of a classic old leather couch to a new ethnic look. But the traditional is melded into the modern in a wholly satisfying way. The interiors were obviously executed by a designer with an acute eye for style. Organic African forms abound, from sculpted birds caught in wild flight to ostrich eggs piled high. A buffet luncheon was already laid out, but I decided to be good and skip it, which wasn't easy because the chicken satays looked delicious, as did the kiwi fruit cheesecake and the deeply decadent chocolate brownies. The wine rack held promise of delightful vintages to come that I could savour later over dinner in the cellar itself. For a cigar lover, there's a humidor filled with Havana's finest hand-rolled, including the magnificent Monte Cristo No. 2s, the mighty Torpedo, or the Pyramide, the true cigar aficionado's favourite. While I freshened up, our ranger Eric was preparing for our afternoon game drive, pressing enormous .375 express cartridges, nearly as big as the cigars I'd just seen, down into the magazine well of his Bruno rifle and closing the bolt safely on an empty chamber.
Thank you.
It's just a precaution. The rangers at Shumbalala, like Eric, are so skilled they're unlikely ever to get into trouble with a wild animal. But it's wise to be careful in Africa. The tracker sits well forward, where he can easily spot spoor in the dust of the roads. He's the ranger's eyes. These men were all born and brought up in the bush, and they read sign that we can't even see. The vehicles are all in contact with the lodge via shortwave radio, so any sighting can immediately be communicated to other guests out in the bush. Game is plentiful here, and we immediately spot blue wildebeest and zebra. This is a common pairing of mutually compatible species, and I'm reminded of the annual migration I recently saw in Tanzania. Hundreds of thousands of these animals setting off in search of the new grass growth across the endless plains of the Serengeti. Impala always looked too fragile to survive in Africa, but no one could accuse the warthog of being a beauty. They're my favourite animals, witty, always happy-looking, as if they've discovered a secret lost to the rest of us. I also spot a bird I've never seen before, iridescent and cocky, a Burchell starling, a first for me, and another first followed soon after. Vultures sulking in a tree alerted us to the fact that there was a kill nearby and that the killers were still around. If not, the vultures would have been on the ground already, picking the carcass clean. Sure enough, we came on a rare and beautiful sighting. 3 male cheetahs who recently killed a young kudu bull. These spotted sprinters aren't really cats at all. Their claws aren't retractable. They're also fairly rare anywhere in Africa. To see 3 at once and on a kill is a rare blessing. With their black teardrop eye stripes, their small heads and lithe bodies, the cheetahs inspire affection and tenderness in almost everyone who sees them. But these are wild creatures, and it's wise not to be confused by any saccharine silver screen illusions perpetrated by Tinseltown. It takes power and brutality to kill even a young kudu bull. Don't be fooled. The cheetah is pretty, but it's a natural-born killer. We move on, and as if one rare sighting wasn't enough, we come across a white rhino and her calf. White rhino are grazers, unlike their irritable cousins, the black rhinos, who inhabit dark, thorny thickets because they're browsers and munch the woody stems of plants. The white rhino is usually placid, even when you find them with their young in extended family groups, as we did. This is the first time I've ever seen so many rhino together. It's a very unusual sighting, and we stay with them, fascinated, conscious of the privilege of seeing a relic from the Pleistocene past, alive and well. Thriving, in fact, even though quite recently they were thought to be in the twilight of their time on Earth as a species. It's definitely the evening of our day in the bush, and after sundowners out in the bush, we go back to camp and find our campfire busily burning away. As an old-timer in Africa, I'm frequently surprised when so many of the new-style sort of postmodern New-Age lodges don't bother to light a campfire at all. A campfire isn't optional, it's essential. A campfire is central to Africa. It reaches back through time to Prometheus, to the tribes who first tamed darkness and carried fire with them on their migration. A fire is not merely light and a deterrent to wild creatures. It's a companion on lonely nights and a source of warmth. It's primal and primitive, and its appeal reaches right down past rationality and logic to ancient parts of the brain that are still stirred by the sight of flames around a burning log in the darkness. Champagne, in this case a lovely bottle of Moët Chandon, is also a natural match for Africa. It has been since the turn of the century, when it was considered in Kenya to be the only really effective cure for blackwater fever, now known as triphase malaria. I doubt that my doctor will agree. The food at Shambhalala is exquisite. Dusty days in the bush seem to demand the punctuation of perfect meals. Not opulent, but definitely beautifully judged. Dinner is always special. The garnet wines, the stars up above improbably profuse, the good company and laughter that matches the perfection of the moment. Next morning was beautiful too. I took great delight in my private suite, and after a dip in my own personal pool, I closed the cover to protect it from falling leaves and daring children. The suites are really opulent and modern, without in any way becoming affected. The little paw print is exclusive to Shambhalala, and the charming combination of old and new, which I mentioned before, of traditional grace and contemporary pared-down modern minimalism, suits my taste perfectly. How is Is it possible to be hungry all the time in the bush? I'm always hungry, and it's no wonder I'm ravenous at Shambhalala. The fresh fruit at breakfast would tempt even the most ardent dieter. Of course, you can go the savoury route as well if you prefer. Or you can indulge totally like our ranger Eric and go for an omelette with creme fraiche and smoked salmon with a little caviar dressing. I wanted to make a trip to the lodge shop and found a whole lot of books I couldn't do without, plus a whole lot of other fascinating indigenous objets d'art, and nice little ethnic knickknacks and tiny lovely animal figurines that any avid collector would covet to complete a collection of mementos of an African safari. Absent-minded as ever, I keep forgetting something somewhere, but the staff at Shumbalala are fastidiously polite and protective and keep returning the bits and pieces I leave lying around and make absolutely no comment about senility or madness, which is a great relief.
Okay, thanks, bye.
It's game drive time again. The pretty impala are always a pleasure. But this time, Eric has a surprise for me. He's tracked down a treasure. A lovely female leopard resting in a tree, as stately as a symphony. She's still lactating, so somewhere she's got cubs. But even that underslung weight of nursing milk can't conceal the litheness and sinuous power of Africa's ultimate killer. Face to face with one of evolution's marvels at home in her habitat, words fail me. It's best to be silent and just watch. Shumbalala is very generous. Not 15 minutes later, we come across a breeding herd of elephant. They've just been wallowing, you can tell from the dark tide line on their tummies, and they're quite relaxed. Except for the anxious mother, she's a little bit nervous because her calf is still quite small. She shepherds him out of sight. The matriarch is as calm as can be. Here's a tip. You can tell she's a female because of the sharp angle formed by the top of her cranium and her forehead. Two of the younger sub-adult elephants engage in a mock duel, but it's just good fun. There's no real aggression at all. After a swim, elephants love a good dust bath. And you can tell from the weeping temporal gland that this young elephant is in must and ready to mate. We watch them in silence. And as before, I'm struck by the air of serenity that hangs over a herd of happy elephant. This is not my imagination. There's something in their body language that we can read, and it says that they're really serene and unafraid. You can tell an edgy elephant from a long way away. Then it's back to the lodge again, and we're greeted and welcomed.
Oh my goodness, I forgot. Thanks very much.
The less said about my forgetfulness, the better. But on the way to my suite, I see these half-tame nyala in amongst the trees. They're majestic antelope, the same genus as kudu and bushbuck, and they share the same twisted horn shape and the same grace and stature. Later, after a quick shower, it's time for a sundown in the dry riverbed near camp. As dusk creeps in across the bush, we toast each other and the sightings we had today. After sundowners, I sneak a look at Shumbalala's guest book. It reads a bit like Who's Who or Debrett's Peerage. The lodge has hosted many VIPs, and the comments are all extremely complimentary. Tonight I dine alone, on fresh trout almondine and crunchy sautéed veggies. I reflect on the gifts that the day brought, and then I hear him. Once you've heard it in the wild, you'll never forget it, and you'll never be the same again. A huge male lion calling in the night. An old hunter in Zambia once told me what the lion says. "Who is the king of this land? I am, I am, I am." All in a diminuendo, which simply adds to the menace. You've guessed. Next morning, we saw more sulking vultures sitting in the trees, and I just knew that we would find last night's lion still on his kill. And we did. The kill was little more than horns and a skeleton by then, but our big boy had eaten well. He drank gallons of water, and then set off, sway-bellied through the bush, looking for a shady place to lie up for the day and digest his dinner. We followed, because Eric had a sort of premonition that we'd see more lion. He's magnificent. A shaggy black mane that's unusually full for a big male in thorn country like this, and mature power in every muscle that draws and releases beneath that savannah-coloured coat. His muzzle is still bloody. Blood coats his forelegs. But he's looking for something. What? Sure enough, he finds them. Two females lying sleekly beneath a tree, lazy and full-bellied too. We sit and watch. I've said this before. It's such a privilege to see this. We should never take it for granted. Perhaps that's what the marabou stork's thinking too. But I doubt it. He's just hungry. A little later, Eric gifts us with a botanical demonstration. He stops beside a bush known as the magic guarri, in Latin, Euclea divinorum. He explains that it's an evergreen that would be browsed flat in the dry season if it didn't possess a really effective deterrent mechanism. He tells me to taste. I do, and understand immediately. The sap is so bitterly tannic, no animal will go near. Eric also demonstrates how to make a paintbrush or a toothbrush from the fibrous twig of the magic guarri.